Hi, everybody. Welcome to Act Now. I'm Julianna Forlano. What a great show I have for you today. I hope you can stick around through the whole thing. Can an anti-war candidate win in what's kind of a red district? Our guest today, combat veteran Brittany Ramos DeBarros, is going to try in New York 11. That is Staten Island, people. Staten Island. There's a lot to talk about there. Then Gaby Goldstein of Sister District joins us to reveal the one sure way to stop Texas suppression of rights, be they voting rights or trans rights or reproductive rights, from spreading all over the place, which is what these right-wing lunatics want to do. All that coming up. And I've got a bit of a preview of act.tv's Friday special. We got a special Occupy Wall Street 10th anniversary extravaganza planned for you at 2 p.m. Eastern. act.tv sprang out of Occupy, just like has occurred in so many resistance movements where they tried to bury us, but they didn't realize we were seeds. And we're going to celebrate how far some of these seeds have come in 10 years. Stay with us. It's going to be a great show. Welcome to Act Now. I'm Julianna Forlano. Brittany Ramos DeBarros, who I'm sure I'm mispronouncing the last name here, proud Afro-Latina Staten Islander, community organizer, and combat veteran, is running for Congress in New York's 11th district. You may remember her because we covered the Amazon warehouse protest that was going on there as the Amazon workers are trying to create a union in that area. And this is where I got to know this candidate. Listen to her speaking at that recent protest.
I'm humbled to even have the opportunity. I know that is a big deal. I don't take it lightly. I don't take that trust lightly. To be able to stand here today in solidarity with you all. And it's true, I'm running for Congress here to fight for workers, to fight for working class people in Staten Island and Brooklyn. But I'm not here because I'm running for Congress. I'm running for Congress because I grew up in a working class family where my parents worked multiple jobs, worked themselves into the hospital, worked until we could still barely put food on the table half the time. We could still barely keep our housing. And that's not right. I'm here and I'm running for Congress because I'm sick of greedy people and greedy corporations getting wealthier off our backs at the expense of our wellness, at the expense of our dignity, while we work ourselves to death. Literally. While we work ourselves to death. And if it's not insult to injury, these buildings were built with subsidies from our tax dollars. $18 million of tax subsidies, basically coming out of our pockets. I work hard every day. I pay my fair share, and I'm happy to do it when I know that those dollars are going to pay for our schools, for benefits, for health cares. Not to line the pockets of greedy bastards who go to space while people are dying.
You see why I wanted to have her on the show? You see, she's coming up next. But here, as an introduction, let us play you her campaign video.
My name is Brittany Ramos DeBarros, and I'm a proud Afro-Latina Staten Islander, community organizer, and combat veteran. This island has been my home since I came back from war, only to find my fellow veterans and community members struggling and dying on the streets. I began to ask why we always have money for war, but not to take care of the people sent to fight them, or the people we're supposedly fighting for.
These wars are immoral. Profiting off of killing is immoral. It is time to stand up, and we won't be silent anymore.
Since then, I've watched a revolving door of leaders tell us what we can't have. Tell us that the poor and vulnerable are our enemies, while the rich skip out on their taxes and get richer off our backs. Enough. I'm running for Congress because we're tired of being told to settle for crumbs and be grateful. We have the highest COVID case rate in the city, and instead of fighting for care and relief, Nicole Malliotakis is out here inciting violent coups and acting like our lives and democracy are worthless. I believe in us. I believe we can have a country where no one dies because they can't afford healthcare, where we have thriving schools filled with happy kids and teachers that don't have to scrape to get by. My name is Brittany Ramos DeBarros, and I'm running to represent New York 11 in Congress. I am unbought, unbossed, and unafraid. I know our power when we come together. We, the workers, the mothers, the nurses, the first responders, the forgotten, are the real backbone of this district. We are already powerful. And when we fight together, we win.
Welcome to the show, Brittany. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So there's a lot to unpack here. Your district is Staten Island, which actually has more registered Democrats than Republicans, yet it almost always leans red. Can you talk about what is going on in your district?
Yep, that's right. And my district is Staten Island and South Brooklyn. We can't forget Bay Ridge over there.
But it's very similar in makeup to Staten Island, Bay Ridge.
Something like that, right? But not only do we have a majority of actually registered Democrats when we look at the numbers in Staten Island alone, when we put them together, we have almost 2-to-1. Democrats compared to registered Republicans. And I think a lot of folks, even who live here, are shocked to hear that, because so many of us have internalized this idea that we are, the minority, that we don't have power, and that we can't have nice things. And we have to kind of settle. And yet, when I really started thinking about it differently, was knocking doors, hundreds of doors in the district, and realizing that what I was hearing at the door was actually cynicism and hopelessness, not a concern about left or right, but just that guy sounds nice, but someone like that can't win here. Or I can't even tell the difference between the Democrats and Republicans who run here. So people sit it out. And even in the 2018 primary, the Democrat turnout was like 11% running, rounding up. And so I think that we need a campaign that is really speaking to the everyday people who I think are more with us than people assume. And I think that Staten Island is more anti-establishment than it is conservative. And that's why, yes, Trump is popular. Unfortunately, he was effective at positioning himself in a lot of people's minds as an outsider who was going to fight for working class people. But
even in New York, where he has screwed working class people. I mean, Staten Island is part of New York City. Oh, that was hard to swallow.
I know, but Bernie is also very popular in Staten Island.
I was just going to ask you that.
Because he's also positioned as an outsider. And so, I think that the campaign that we need, the organizing that we need, is not actually about left versus right. It's about speaking to people from the place of right versus wrong and top versus bottom. That it is the ultra wealthy who have been controlling party politics for too long versus the rest of us who are just trying to survive. And so that's what we're doing.
Well, you've been involved in the Poor People's Campaign and About Face Veterans Against the War. These are two things that are, kind of outside of party politics. You're standing up for the poor, and you're standing against forever wars, which both of the parties seem to be okay with, probably because they get a lot of money from defense contractors. This really positions you well to be an independent voice.
Yeah, and I think that's, I think I can speak to voters in a different way, because I am like a lot of people here. You hear so many people when you're canvassing who say, oh no, I'm not registered with a party. I'm proudly independent. And I was one of those people for so much of my life. But I then also realized that if we can't engage in the primary, then we can't be a part of making sure that we have someone who becomes the nominee who will really fight for us. And the reality is until we change some of the structural barriers, in most places in New York, you have to run as one of the parties in order to win. And I think the Democrats, although some of the, establishment folks have not, really been fighting, I think, for the values we say we believe in, to me, it's about running on a platform that is actually upholding the values that the party has claimed that we are supposed to be fighting for a long time. And,
when's the primary?
I'm excited about that. It's June 2022.
June 2022 is a primary. And who are you running against in the primary?
Yeah, so right now there's one other person who announced they also ran in 2018 and then dropped out after a couple months. And so, we wish them well, but we are just really focused on building the movement. We started early, we're knocking doors, we are canvassing already, right? Because we know that this is not just about turning out the same folks who have been turning out. It's about really organizing and building a base of working people here who are ready to take our power back.
Has the Democratic Party given you a wink or a nod or some kind of support? Are they supporting you in some way?
Not yet. I think in the way that they typically approach this, it's still early. And so I've been making my rounds, having all of the conversations with leadership and different folks, and I hope to earn their support. I hope to build buy-in behind the idea that if we actually want to advance these shared values, that we really have to reach beyond the choir, and we have to be willing to invest in building in a way that not just can help us win this time, but where we could actually finally hold the seat because we have a real energized base behind us.
Well, the party didn't support AOC either very well, right? When she went against that other guy who was there forever. And this is New York we're talking about.
Yeah.
Same party mechanics.
Yeah, I think that there is so much space and opportunity, and I feel really good about the momentum we've built. We, have already raised over $250,000 in grassroots contributions, not taking a dime of corporate PAC money. I'm so proud of that. That's pretty unprecedented for a candidate like me in the district. And we have, a lot of exciting momentum, volunteers signing up, and endorsements from folks like Brand New Congress, Way to Lead, PCCC, Move On, and several others that we, so we're feeling really good about how we've been received in district, both by those who are in party leadership, but I think most importantly by everyday people who need to be a part of building this movement together.
Your bio said that your time in Afghanistan really changed your mind about war and that you came home angry and hurt and feeling betrayed. Can you talk a little bit about that experience where your eyes were opened?
Yeah, and I do veteran organizing. I work with thousands of anti-war vets around the country, and I think that a lot of folks don't realize how common perspective this is within veteran and military community. That this is, I think, probably the majority popular opinion.
That's very interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's just very interesting that the general zeitgeist is that veterans are pro whatever they, military.
I know. I think that that's because there is a real civilian military divide, and the exposure that most folks have to veterans and the military community are when we are being kind of held up in politician dog and pony shows, and all of these kinds of environments where you're not slowing down and really hearing how people feel about what they participated in. And for me, I was a true believer when I deployed. I knew that there were some problems, that some things needed to change, but I really believed that I was going to help the Afghan people, protect them from the bad guys, and fight for freedom and democracy and all these things. And when I got there, it was just
devastating, honestly, to realize that we were doing so much harm, so much more harm than good, I think, to the very people who I was supposedly there to protect, to see the rampant kind of lack of accountability and corruption within decision-making chains and chains of command, and to see the way that corporations seem to be really running the show. And so, I came home and I really struggled to make sense of why. What did I just participate in if it wasn't to actually have a real commitment to helping the Afghan people, and it didn't really seem to be doing anything to help the American people. So what, and
so what was it for?
Really digging.
What was it for? I mean, I know contractors made a ton of money there. I know there are natural resources that the U.S. would love to exploit there. What do you think was the actual reason?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of reasons. And I think in the discourse around what happened with Afghanistan, I've been a person really pushing us to be nuanced and reflective and remember to challenge ahistoricism. I think that, it's really important to dig into the history of the US's involvement in the region before we invaded, and the role that played in, in where we are today and where Afghan people are today. And I think that that's really critical, because I think that if we are going to have a different way of engaging, I think that our foreign policy is not just harmful, it is counterproductive to our goals. It makes us less safe and secure. And it makes people around the world less, safe and secure in the places where we're bombing and invading. And so, I think that we have to really take a look at the ways that we have meddled, the ways that we have engaged in proxy wars, and just the history of interventionism, and question, has that actually been working for us? And I would argue that it hasn't. And I would argue that it has been working for politicians and corporations who, like you said, have gotten very wealthy off of these kinds of interventions.
The technique notwithstanding that President Biden used to leave Afghanistan, do you think it was the right move for the Biden administration?
Yes, no question. I am grateful that President Biden followed through on that promise. I was deployed in 2012 when he, in his vice president debate, promised profusely that, these other guys, they have conditions on leaving, not us. We leave in 2014, no matter what. And my mission in Afghanistan was transition operations to support that withdrawal plan. So I felt pretty that is one of the pretty personal betrayals I felt, was just that, I went there, I was helping with these transition operations, and then we didn't leave. Like, what? Why? And the fact that there's not even a real expectation that there would be accountability for that. And so I'm grateful that President Biden followed through on that. And also, I think that a plan for withdrawal that does not include real humanitarian reparations to the Afghan people, and does not include a real plan around displacement and refugees, is a plan to continue forever war. It is a plan in line with the kind of policy that we have had in the past that has led us back repeatedly to regions over and over and over again. And I would argue that there are some bad actors who know that, and who know that that by not actually addressing our own doctrinal beliefs that speak to the fact that the best way to address extremism and insurgency is actually to build up civil infrastructure and political, social, economic stability. That there, folks know that that's actually written in our own doctrine, and the fact that we don't practice that, I feel like, amounts to a very intentional plan to make sure that at our expense, at the expense of the American people, that there will be future opportunities to manufacture consent for more war that continues to line the pockets of more profiteers.
You said it. Are we not voting for this woman? We must vote. I'm going to move to Staten Island. So from the other part of Brooklyn. So I was really interested in something that I saw on your About Face Veterans Against the War page. It said that you have your bio there. It said you have a special interest in Psyops, which I was like, awesome, let's discuss. Because it seems like here, not even in the military, but here, the propaganda from the right And the propaganda from the left is, it's all crazy. Do you have any suggestions for, like, just give us a sense from a Psyops perspective of what we're looking at? Because I think people are losing their minds.
Yeah. And, for anyone who doesn't know, psychological operations is essentially psychological warfare. That's what it used to be called. And it is propaganda.
No one wanted to say, oh, we're doing warfare. Let's just call it operations.
Right. No, we love euphemisms. Yes. Kind of like the Department of Defense.
Right.
And I, so my training was in propaganda, but particularly propaganda with the aim to shape people's beliefs toward action, right? Because we wanted to shape their behavior in some way. And that's how the military thinks about messaging and strategy. That's indicated even in the fact that, this doesn't fall under the purview of PSYOP, but the DoD has an entire office dedicated to forming contracts for movies, TV shows, video games, music. And one of the things that they do is when they sign those contracts, the person, gets access to consulting, military equipment, whatever, but they sign over creative control to the DoD, and the DoD will redact whatever messaging or stories that they don't feel shines, our operations and military in the light that they want it to be shined in. And so I tell that story because yeah, thousands.
What's going on? I'm like, why does everyone why is this so glorified? I mean, and so you explained it. Thank you very much.
Yes. And it's like, and so for me, I think that we underutilize the strategy of the, kind of focusing on the reach and popularization and normalization of our ideas. I think that sometimes there's this tendency for folks in movement in particular to kind of live in a bubble and be like, everybody already knows this. Everybody already knows this terminology or phrasing that we're using. Of course. I mean, right now, the discussion around taxing the rich, right? I'm hearing folks say, well, everybody knows that. We don't actually need more spread. We need action. And I'm like, well, even if, first of all, I know everybody doesn't know it because of the skyrocketing Google searches that are happening, which means that people are like, what does this mean? Right.
Which shocks me at how out of touch people are. Anyway,
right,
go ahead.
Exactly. And that's, and I think we just have to really check ourselves around our commitment to reaching people who are not already organized, right? Who are not already in movement. That's how we grow. That's how we build power. And I think that messaging strategy and thinking about how we can reach people, why people believe what they believe, setting aside the tendency towards condescension, and really trying to honestly understand, why does this person genuinely believe this and how can I speak to that, is something that we have to be doing if we actually want to grow our political projects and our political power.
Irregardless of the political divide, most Americans don't want forever wars.
Right.
So on a lot of things, we're kind of on the same page, but we've been pitted against each other because just like you said, with the wars and creating chaos abroad instead of creating stability, it benefits corporations. It's just, how do we get out of this? It seems like a swirling drain where we're going down the tubes while the corporations profit off our backs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's real. And I think we need to communicate how, that this is literally life and death. I make an anti-war statement, or I say, I'm sorry that I participated in this invasion because I don't feel that I helped. And people are clutching their pearls like, oh my God, how could you say that? And I'm just like, because it's true. And we need to tell the truth if we're going to change anything. We can't actually change anything if we don't confront the truth.
When I heard you speak, I was like, yeah, we need her on the show immediately. And I think I said that. And then I guess your guy was like, hey, we can get her to do that. And so it was terrific. And I was really thrilled because, I mean, I have heard these talking points before, not talking points, but I've heard these point of views before is because we're part of the movement. But it's just so nice to hear them being spoken out loud in a position that is, you're unapologetic. You're not hedging like, well, we need a Department of Defense because we got it. And maybe, you're just out there. So I really appreciate that. I appreciate the clarity of your message.
Thank you.
If there are new Staten Islanders watching, What would you want to say specifically to the folks in your district, meaning new to you?
Yeah, I would say that we're building a campaign that is about all of us. And we have every reason to not be hopeful, to be cynical, to feel that I'm just another person who is making a bunch of promises that I won't deliver on. But what I hope comes through is I'm the kind of person who is really committed to advancing an agenda. I'm tired of making demands, and I know so many other people are. I'm tired of making demands. I'm tired of begging people in positions of power to do the bare minimum. The only way we change things is if we come together and we step into our power. And they want us to be hopeless and cynical and believe that we don't have the power to win, that we have to be Republican light, that we have to be these perfect, polished ideas. I don't believe that. I believe that being real, building deep relationship builds power. And that's what we're doing. I want you to be a part of it. This campaign is all of ours, and join us.
Brittany Ramos DeBarros, thank you so much for coming on the program. I hope you'll join us again sometime.
I'd love to.
I hope that people who are watching across the country actually see what I saw when I invited Brittany to come on the program. And these days you can get involved from across the country in campaigns that you feel are important. So thank you so much. Miss Ramos DeBarros is running for New York's 11th district. Let us know where we can find out more information, Brittany, and where people can maybe make a contribution if they feel so moved.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again so much for having me. You can check out our website at brittanyforcongress.org, all spelled out, or our social media, Britt, BRITT, number 4, Congress. And please do consider a contribution, especially if you're outside of the district and can't volunteer. We've been talking about the foothold that corporate money has in our decision making. And the only way we're going to change that is if we elect enough people who are truly loyal to the grassroots, to everyday people. But that means that everyday people have to show up, have to contribute, so that we have the resources to really win. And I know that together we can do that. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We wish you the best. We'll be following your campaign and hopefully talk to you again soon.
Yes, definitely. Take care.
You're watching ActTV. I'm Julianna Forlano. Stay tuned for more. More? Me? Well, here we are. I thought we were doing something between that segment and this next segment, but that's fine. I'm cool with just a random stop and chat. Okay, so before we go on to our next interview, which I'm very excited to have Gaby Goldstein coming up in just a minute, I wanted to tell you about our Friday show. The 10th anniversary of Occupy Wall Street is happening this Friday. There's going to be gatherings at, I would imagine, Zuccotti Park, where we will be with ActTV's own Messiah Rhodes on the scene. He is the host of the Black Power Magic Hour. You can check it out on our Twitch channel, on our YouTube channel, but he's going to be down there. We're going to be hopefully talking back and forth with him, getting some coverage of what's going on the scene. But we also have done interviews with folks who I think everyone would want to hear from about Occupy Wall Street. We've got Richard Wolff, Professor Richard Wolff. We've got Noam Chomsky. Hello, Noam Chomsky is going to talk about the importance of Occupy. And tomorrow I'm getting the opportunity to speak with Marianne Williamson. You may know her from any number of places. She is, what would be known as a pastor if she was in some specifically organized religion. She is an author, and she also, you may recall, ran for president, where she was able to speak about the needs of children and an anti-war and anti-imperialism platform from the stage. Now, she didn't win, and she got painted as like the crystal woo-woo lady, which I do say that I don't think that's the case. I know Marianne, and that's just basically not the case. She said something about wanting to buy a crystal goblet, and everyone's like, "Oh, crystals!" They were just waiting to undermine a woman with a spiritual background who may want to actually run for office. But check out, I have a little video from Marianne. And why do I bring this up? Because if you've been watching this show or watching our archives on YouTube, you've seen us talk with Jay Ponte. In fact, my interview with him, he's an activist. He was on the ground at Occupy LA, and he really made the case for how Marianne Williamson with her project called Sister District, was at one of the major forces behind, as well as Occupy Wall Street, behind getting Bernie Sanders to actually run for office. So she has played a crucial and important role. Here is a video of Marianne talking about the intersection between spirituality and politics.
Sometimes people say to me that it's because of their spiritual journey that they don't want to engage in politics. People will say, well, you know, politics is so toxic and it's so mean-spirited and it's so negative. And on a spiritual journey, that's everything that we're trying to get away from. But there is a conundrum there, because what we don't engage, we can't transform. And it's only a counterfeit notion of enlightenment that would ever give us a pass on addressing human suffering, because the spiritual journey is a journey of the heart. That can't just be talk. You can't talk about a journey to the heart and turn away from a starving child. You can't talk about a journey to the heart and turn away from the immense amounts of unnecessary human suffering that exist on this planet. So for those of us who are on a spiritual journey, there is some very deep questioning that I believe calls to us. And what's interesting is that if you look at Martin Luther King and you look at Mahatma Gandhi, this is not a wheel we have to reinvent. This has already been done. There have already been those on the planet, in fact, the two greatest political lights of the 20th century, both Gandhi and Martin Luther King, who then traveled to India, studied the principles of nonviolence, and brought them to the United States to apply them to the struggle for civil rights in the United States during the 1960s. And what King said of Gandhi is that he was the first person in history to take the love ethic, and to turn it into a broad-scale social force for good, that he lifted love above and beyond mere personal interaction. We know what love does in personal relationships. We know what love does to heal our own personal lives. But what Gandhi and King did was that they saw love as a force, what they called nonviolence, inside the heart of every man, woman, and child, as a force that would heal political and social relationships as well. This was profound, and it was profoundly successful. You know, when people talk about how this love stuff is kind of naive, like the idea that we could actually live like brothers on this planet is just some naive pipe dream. Well, I believe that what's naive is to think that the human race will survive for another 100 years if we do not find a way to live like brothers on this planet. So there is more than a moral imperative that stands in front of us. This option of trying to take a stand for another possibility, to take a stand for the reordering of human civilization, away from a place where economics is our bottom line, to humanitarian values being our bottom line, to take a stand for this as an actual possibility, and to be very serious about it and to be very savvy about it. I don't believe it's a pipe dream. I do believe it's a moral imperative. But most importantly, I believe it is the only survivable option for the human race.
We're going to have Marianne Williamson on our big Occupy Wall Street 10th anniversary extravaganza, starting live on wherever you're watching it right now, wherever you're watching the show right now at 2 p.m. Eastern on this Friday, the 17th. So stay tuned for that. Also, stay tuned right now, because coming up next, we're going to talk about the one surefire way we can keep the idea of Texas's a suppression of all our rights from spreading to other places. Gaby Goldstein from Sister District joins us, so stay tuned. Governor Abbott of Texas is in the running to be the next Donald Trump. And by that, I mean he's a wannabe fascist in chief of the United States. He's padding his anti-democratic resume by not only signing one of the most extreme anti-women's reproductive rights laws in the country since Roe v. Wade, but he also signed a severely restrictive voting rights bill. In fact, under complete Republican control, the Texas legislature has taken a sharp right turn this year. They have enacted an enormous list of conservative priorities on abortion, on transgender rights, on teaching about racism in schools, on voting, anything you think is important, they are destroying. And conservatives across the country are hoping that as goes Texas, so goes the nation. How can we stop this? Joining us to discuss this, Gaby Goldstein, co-founder of Sister District. She's here to discuss the single most effective way to combat suppressive attacks from Republican-led state legislatures. Gaby, thanks for joining us on the program today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We have so much to do. How can we stop this craziness? And are we too late?
We are not too late. That's the good news. I loved the Marianne Williamson clip, providing such a positive vision for the future. And it's completely within our grasp. We just have to focus on the pieces where we can really have leverage. And my organization, Sister District, focuses on building progressive power in state legislatures. We started this organization because we saw a gap in organizing capacity, in resources, going to progressives running for state legislature and serving in state legislatures. These are such overlooked venues of power. You mentioned what is going on in the Texas state legislature. This sort of regressive policy laboratory is a true skill of the Republican Party. They have been at this game for decades, weaponizing state legislatures for their own regressive policy goals. And the good news is that because these are such small races compared to congressional races, compared to statewide or national races, we can really affect the outcome of these elections with far less money, far less resources than it would take to flip, a higher level of office of the ballot. So we see a huge return on investment for your volunteer time, your volunteer dollar, going to state legislative races and supporting great progressive state legislators, because this is where the rubber hits the road, right? Mm-hmm. Everything that you just mentioned, voting rights, reproductive freedom issues and laws. Look at what's going on with COVID and the state level restrictions around masking and vaccine mandates and all the rest. This is really where the rubber hits the road.
As you mentioned, they are way ahead of us with a decade or more of laying down this conservative agenda. How fast do you think we can undo this or at least block it? I mean, they're trying to get everywhere with their ideas. Virginia.
Yeah. Right. So I hate to say Democrats are tardy to the party when it comes to paying attention to state legislatures. Jane Mayer wrote a really great book called Dark Money that really traces the conservative interest and infrastructure building project around state stuff going back 100 years. So we are really kind of behind the ball when it comes to understanding the importance of these races and investing in them. And the good news is, I think, especially with this new round of redistricting coming up, I think the public is coming to understand the power of state legislatures, how they control redistricting and therefore, drive polarization in Congress and in our state houses, and how the trickle down effects of who controls our states really controls, often increasingly the outcome of our lives, our health, our safety. So, we're behind the ball, but we're working really hard. And there is a good cadre of organizations that are focused on this in the progressive space and working overtime. I mean, this year, you mentioned Virginia. This year, the entire lower chamber of Virginia is up for re-election, as well as the governor's mansion. And we and allies on the ground in Virginia worked tirelessly to flip both chambers of the state legislature in 2019. They've only had this Democratic trifecta for 2 years and have already capped insulin prices, raised the minimum wage, rolled back abortion restrictions. But it's really in jeopardy this year. And so folks really have an opportunity to get involved this year, help us hold on to that beautiful blue trifecta in Virginia and roll that momentum into the midterms. midterms. I think, we're all nervous about next year for the congressional races, Senate races, and also for state legislatures. So, democracy is a muscle. We have to exercise it all the time. And we have really great opportunities this year in Virginia to keep that going.
I literally just ran into in the coffee shop a state representative, not from my district, who she said, well, I was kind of involved and then no one else was going to run. So they're like, how about you? So I just did it with the help of Sister District. Now, her name, of course, is escaping me at this moment, but your organization has really been on the ground. How does it change the game of keeping Republican attacks on our rights on a state level? How does it change the game that we can't rely on courts to uphold precedent and we can't really rely on Congress to act to keep our rights in check? How does this change the game?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what we're seeing in the Supreme Court is didn't come out of nowhere. There has been a long-term conservative project in jurisprudence to narrow federal protections and to expand state level rights, right? The idea of states' rights. This is a banner that was adopted by conservative aligned Americans back to the founding of our country. So this is a very long-term project that has kind of come to roost in the current Supreme Court. And we're seeing decisions, which we should expect, that curtail federal protections and really kick the can back to states in issues around voting rights, in issues around partisan gerrymandering, certainly in the repro space, and in lots and lots of other areas. And this will continue for at least the next generation, right? We've got the Supreme Court that we've got. Congress is, the gridlock is astonishing. It is, to have a federal trifecta and not be able to accomplish some basic goals really highlights the importance of states and the fact that we can't rely on Congress. We can't rely on this razor thin trifecta to, and majority in the Senate to get rid of the filibuster. And we can't rely on the courts. They're not, these are larger long-term projects that don't align with what with our policy goals. So states matter. And I'm huge on the idea of cultivating a narrative about progressive federalism, right? The idea that states' rights has a negative connotation because, of course, it's been associated with so much regressive policy. We got to turn that around because this is not coming back around anytime soon. It's not an either or in terms of looking for federal protections and building power in states. We have to do both. But progressives historically have not done both. We've really overly relied on a federal strategy to secure our rights and policies that we want. And we've really let the state strategy, just not develop. So we got to turn it around.
It's interesting because I work in the media. Obviously, I teach about media on a college level. And so much of what we're talking about right now is media consolidation and the loss of investigative or even just regular journalism on the local level. Thinking back over your work with Sister District, do you see over maybe the last however many, it's even been like less than a decade in which this is really amped up, do you see how the loss of local journalism has played a part in people just kind of checking out of their local politics?
1,000,000%. It's an absolute crisis. The loss of local media is an absolute crisis. It's the consolidation of media really drives the nationalization of politics in a way that's very corrosive at the local level. And we saw this in 2020, I think all over the country where national narratives, Republican narratives around stuff like defund the police and socialism and these sorts of things had a really outsized impact on Democrats running for local office because there wasn't enough of a countervailing voice to really be talking about the local issues that matter, because those were not the issues, primarily that candidates at the local level were really running on for state legislative campaigns, but that nationalization of media and of politics can be really detrimental at the local, at keeping local civic engagement alive and keeping folks aware and informed about truly local issues that affect them.
Let's talk about which races are on your radar right now. We spoke about Virginia. Where else are we looking at? We just, right before you, we had Brittany Ramos DeBarros, who is running in Staten Island's 11. It's not the local state house, but it's kind of an interesting grassroots candidate who just looked around and said, something has to be done. And she just stepped up to do it. I guess I have two questions now. Which races are on your radar? And what would you say to people who are looking around who may actually think, maybe I should run?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, redistricting is happening now. Hopefully your viewers are following along in their own states. Every 10 years, we hold a census in this country. And then after the census, when we figure out who lives where and how many people live where, we redraw all the maps for Congress and state legislatures all over the country. It happens once a decade. It's happening right now. State legislatures control the process in most states for both congressional maps and state legislative maps. After the 2010 census and during that redistricting cycle, Republicans controlled so many state houses that they were able to run the game and gerrymander the F out of, you know, states all across the country. We're still dealing with that. And so what's happening now is that a lot of those Republicans who gerrymandered their way into power are now getting to draw new maps again. So there's you know, a lot of concern about how these maps are going to turn out, and it really affects next year, right, for Congress and for state leg, because folks are going to be running next year under maps that are getting drawn right now. There's a lot of opportunity for folks to get involved in the redistricting process. I would check out an organization called All on the Line, which is an affiliate of the National Democratic Redistricting Committee, chaired by Eric Holder. And they can help you figure out where to show up at meetings on Zoom, how to submit testimony, all the rest. But that's really going to, you know, determine what is competitive next year for Democrats, for progressives. And so on my radar for next year, very high on the list are both Arizona and Michigan. Those state legislatures are within flipping distance. We're down just a couple in Arizona and just a handful in Michigan. And both of those states have independent commissions that are going to be drawing their new maps as opposed to their Republican-controlled legislatures. So those two states next year, I think, are prime for flipping blue. But lots of other states too. It'll just depend on how the maps turn out. One other thing I wanted to just say about Texas, people think Texas is out of reach for Democrats and all the rest. Only 11,000 votes separated Democrats from holding the majority in the Texas State House. So, you know, that's not a lot of votes, and you know, we need to get them in the right places. But no state is off limits for us. We have to be organizing everywhere. People need to run everywhere. There's a wonderful organization that we're so proud to be partners with called Run for Something, and they'll help you run for whatever you want to run for. And so, you know, there's really some great infrastructure, and I love folks to get involved, and, you know, we've all got to do it.
I love that. Run for something. That's exactly where people who may want to run start. Like, well, I might want to do something, but how do I know? Run for something. That's really perfect. Gaby Goldstein is, she's a co-founder of Sister District. I do thank you for coming on the program today. You can follow Gaby on Twitter at Gaby_Goldstein. I had a final question for you about Texas. Do you think that the people those 11,000 or 40,000 or 100,000 people who maybe just sat out the election or didn't think anything was going to happen, do you have any indication that maybe they're aware of what's going on and that they need to really get involved?
Absolutely. There's such amazing...
Are people like, what's happened? Now I live in some...
You know, there are incredible organizers on the ground in Texas. I just want to shout out Texas Organizing Project, TOP, and many others. that are doing the year-round community-based organizing that is absolutely bedrock to our ability to engage people in civic stuff and turn out the vote, right? So Texans are fired up. There's, but I will say those organizations need more support, right? There's always, kind of a push and pull between, folks, should I give to a national organization? Should I give to a local organization? And, your donor portfolio is what it is, but I would encourage folks to look locally too. Same with abortion funds and so forth. There's usually great folks on the ground doing the work. We don't always need to start a new project or start a new thing. And in Texas, there's some really great infrastructure. So I'm extremely optimistic about Texas. And if we can get the local folks the resources they need, if we can get great folks to run for state ledge, the trends are going in our direction. And it may not be next year, but it's coming up that we're going to flip Texas blue.
That's great. Thank you, Gaby. You've made me feel so much better. The news makes you feel like we're turning into ultra conservative religious state when really we're the United States and there's still hope. So thanks for coming on the program and making me feel better.
Thanks so much.
All right. Don't forget to follow Gaby at Gaby__ Goldstein on Twitter. You're watching Act Now. I'm Julianna Forlano. If you're new to the show, we try to follow what's happening in the progressive action sphere. So we thank you for your eyeballs. I thank you for your earballs. But don't forget to subscribe and put your comments in. I do notice people are writing in with the groups that they want coverage of, some things that whatever you're involved in, hit us up. We've got an info at act.tv. That always gets to me, and I will be putting your projects and your activism right here on these airwaves. Thanks so much to everyone who's worked on this program to make it come to life. I'm Julianna Forlano. We will see you Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for our Occupy Wall Street look back and, celebratory anniversary, 10 years, baby. Thanks for watching.